That jarring cacophony tells you you're back with the Power of Three podcast on another Book Club Monday. I'm Kenny Smith, and given that the last few episodes have taken us into the territories of the 9th, 10th and 11th Doctors, it doesn't take an Adric maths genius to work out that next we'll be covering the 12th Doctor, and that's exactly what we're doing today. We are looking at Diamond Dogs, the 61st novel in the BBC new series Adventures run. It was written by Mike Tucker and featured the 12th Doctor and Bill Potts. It was published on the 20th of April 2017 alongside The Shining Man by Cavan Scott and Plague City by Jonathan Morris, both of which of course we have previously featured on this podcast. So if you want to know all about them, go and find those episodes. They'll be on your podcatcher of choice. So here we have Diamond Dogs. Let's take a look at the glorious cover by Lee Binding. We've got Peter Capaldi with his lovely big Series 10 hair, holding his hands up, looking quite Pertwee-esque there with his shirt cuffs popping through his jacket and a curious expression on his face. And we've got a smiley, happy looking Bill Potts behind him, looking slightly startled as well. We've got the TARDIS being held up by a grappling hook. I think it's probably a reuse of that shot from the Day of the Doctor, but tweaked slightly to make it into the Capaldi TARDIS. And they're also surrounded by the rune. They're also surrounded by some planetary rings, and in them there's diamonds. Lots and lots of diamonds. And in the background there's a galaxy and lots of stars. So yes, it's a very sci-fi cover, this one. But as we turn it over, we find out which planet those rings are from. Here in Saturn, it literally rains diamonds. For over 15 years, the crew of the Kolos Ernista mining facility 27 has been extracting diamonds from deep within the atmosphere of Saturn. Diamonds that help to fund the ever-expanding human empire. But when a mining operation goes wrong, a rescue mission must be launched to save a worker lost overboard. A worker who claims that he has seen something amongst the swirling clouds. Something that can't possibly exist. When the Doctor and Bill arrive, they immediately find themselves caught between hostile miners, suspicious security guards, and corrupt company officials as they face accusations of sabotage and diamond theft. And below them, in the crushing atmosphere of the gas giant, something is starting to rise. Now that's what I call epic. That's a good, exciting intro. Something is starting to rise. Yes, I like that. You can hear Peter Capaldi saying that. Something is starting to rise. In a slightly more, proper actor way. Anyway, we're now going to hear an excerpt from the book. However, like the other two books in this wave of novels, there was no official BBC audiobook release, sadly. So for this one, we've had to create our own. And in this case, we're going to return to the reliable, dulcet tones of our podcast regular co-conspirator, Steevie Day. Over to you, Steevie!
The vault on Kolos Ernista Facility 27 was almost full. Soon the high-security exercise of shipping the diamonds would begin, but for the moment the chamber was quiet and empty. The only noise in the cavernous chamber, a slight vibration caused by the Cancri gravity inverters. A vibration that caused the diamonds to give off a faint, almost musical tinkle as they shifted inside their cold, metal containers. That musical tinkling was slowly drowned out by a new sound, a harsh, elephantine trumpeting, and a new container joined the others in the vault, slowly materializing in the exact center of the massive circular chamber. The new edition was small, blue and rectangular, and had the words Police Public Call Box emblazoned on a sign above its doors. An Earth historian might have recognised it as a primitive communications artefact from the planet's pre-space age era, but they would have been wrong. Behind those rickety-looking wooden doors was one of the most sophisticated time-space machines ever constructed, a TARDIS, a time ship from the planet Gallifrey, capable of travelling to any world in any point in history. This particular TARDIS was the property of a Time Lord known simply as the Doctor, and a few seconds after it had appeared, one of the doors was snatched open, and the face of the Doctor peered out into the gloom. In this incarnation, the first of his brand new life cycle, the Doctor was tall, thin, and gangly limbed, with unruly grey hair and vast, endlessly expressive eyebrows. Satisfied that he had landed in the correct location, he stepped out of the TARDIS and calling back over his shoulder, "Come on! Out you come! The quicker we get this done, the quicker we can get back." Another figure appeared in the doorway. Bill was tall and slim, with a shock of jet-black curly hair and a bright, inquisitive expression. She looked around the darkened room warily. She had started to get used to the fact that travelling in the TARDIS with the Doctor inevitably meant landing in the middle of something dangerous. Only recently she'd been stalked by emoticon robots on a distant planet in the far future and nearly eaten by an alien fish in Victorian London. She stepped nervously from the TARDIS. "Where are we?" "Saturn." The Doctor didn't look up. "Saturn, right." Bill rolled her eyes. "Nardole is going to give you a right taking off when he finds out." "Well, he's not going to find out if you don't tell him." Bill gave a snort. "He's going to realise eventually you can't keep sneaking off without him noticing." The Doctor extended a bony figure towards the TARDIS. "Time machine, remember? We can go back before he knows we've gone." "Yeah, and he knows that too. He's not stupid." "No, but he is easily distracted. I've left a copy of this month's Good Food magazine with a pull-out section on things you can make with Rice Krispies." Bill shrugged, admitting defeat. "Yeah, that'll do the trick." Shivering in the cold air, she zipped up her denim jacket, thrusting her hands into the pockets and looking around the room. "Not impressed by Saturn, to be honest," she sniffed. "Ah, but you should be." The Doctor turned, spinning on his heel, throwing his arms wide. "If you only knew what most people would give to be standing where you are standing right now." Bill looked around in bemusement. "In a big empty room?" "Ah, but the room isn't empty, is it?" Bill shrugged. "Okay, a room full of big cylinders. Still not getting my pulse racing." "Well then, maybe you should be asking yourself what's inside the cylinders." With that, the Doctor made a beeline for one of the huge containers, squatted down in front of it, and slipped on his sonic glasses. Bill sighed. He was obviously not going to give her a straight answer as to why they were here, so she might as well just sit tight and let him get on with it. The sooner they got whatever they were after, the sooner they could get out of here. Bill was starting to get seriously bored now. What was the point of hanging around with a man who had a machine capable of travelling anywhere in time and space if they were just going to end up in some dark, cold space warehouse? She hadn't even found any windows she could look out of. "Saturn," she snorted contemptuously, stamping her feet to ward off the cold. If the Doctor was aware of her discomfort, then he didn't show it. He was still sitting cross-legged in front of the cylinder. He'd put away his sonic sunglasses and was now prodding at the door with his sonic screwdriver. The high-pitched warbling that echoed round the room was setting Bill's teeth on edge. Patience at an end, Bill stamped over to the Doctor and prodded him in the back with the toe of her boot. "Are you going to be much longer?" "Careful!" The Doctor peered up at her reproachfully. "You could set it off." "Set what off?" "The alarm," said the Doctor, "and that would be bad." "What alarm?" cried Bill in exasperation. "If you would just let me know what you were trying to do." "It'd be a lot easier if I just show you." The Doctor scrambled to his feet. Grasping her by the shoulders, he steered her firmly to one side, then turned to the cylinder and raised the sonic screwdriver once more. The harsh, cricket-like warble filled the air again, and slowly the front of the cylinder started to swing upwards. As it did so, strip lights inside flickered into life, their harsh white glare making Bill squint after so long in the gloom. The door clunked to a halt, and the Doctor reached inside the cylinder, plucking something small and shiny from one of the racks that lined the curved walls. He shut off his sonic screwdriver and held out the object for Bill to see. She rubbed her eyes in disbelief. It was a diamond. The cylinder was brimming with diamonds.
Huge thanks to Steevie for that. Now, we're going to speak with the author, as we always do in these episodes, as we find out just how the book came about, what went into it, and what the authors knew about this new companion before they began work. So, let's now speak to the one and only Mike Tucker.
I'm Mike Tucker, and I'm the author of Diamond Dogs.
So here you are, you're back with the 12th Doctor. Obviously, but by this point you'd seen him on TV and had got a bit of a handle on him. But then, of course, they go and change his entire characterisation.
They do indeed. So yeah, the three of us who are doing this particular run of novels, so that's me, Cavan, and Johnny. I think with the three, it's Cavan Scott and Johnny Morris, yeah. We were writing the full-on grumpy old bugger version of Capaldi, and we reached pretty much the end of our books, the writing process, going down that route. And then we were invited down to Cardiff to watch the pilot, a rough cut of the pilot. Not so much to give us a handle on Capaldi's Doctor, but ostensibly to give us a handle on Bill. Obviously brand new companion, unlike the previous book where Jenna was a holdover. This was a brand new companion. So Johnny couldn't make it. It was me and Cavan. And we came out of that screening going, oh my God, they've completely softened him. They've rubbed all those edges off him. They've changed the setup of making him now he's a sort of a professor in this Bristol University, and he's nice. So we sat down afterwards and well, we're going to have to rewrite. Phoned Johnny, said, right, tone it all back down again. So that was a question of going back through the entire manuscript and just taking out a lot of the snippiness. Unfortunately, I think we were like a day away from delivery. So if there's some stuff that slips through in these books, that's why. It's because we only realized very late in the game that they changed the Doctor quite so significantly. The other interesting thing about that final season that Capaldi did is that the slots in which you could write a standalone story were very, very tricky because, of course, he's blinded and has several episodes where he's actually blind. You never know whether Nardole is going to be with him or not. So we were all choosing our points of... I deliberately chose not to have Nardole in the book. That meant I could only be set in this little gap right at the beginning of the series when they're sneaking off without telling Nardole, whereas I think the others definitely sort of set it further down the season. So there was a little bit of juggling to make sure all that worked. So we were fortunate in that we were sent a full set of scripts for this season, so we did know the direction it was going. It was just the way Capaldi was playing the role was the surprise.
And wonderful too. Just such a refreshing change. Yes. Just that he felt that he was more at ease with himself by this point.
Completely.
Peter sort of found the role himself. So, yeah, it's lovely. So how did you find writing for Bill? Because she's got such a different energy, and the way that she bounces off him is really good fun.
Again, it's the same thing as I'm going to say about, as I said about Rory and Amy. I mean, I think Stephen Moffat did a really good job of actually laying Bill out in very broad strokes. She's very easy to write for. I mean, Pearl plays it really nicely, but their relationship is a very easy one to understand. She is this student who isn't actually a student but wants to learn, and he sees the potential in her. It's a very Dr. Dolittle, Eliza Doolittle, Professor Higgins story. So that's great fun to write. Plus, he was taking her on a very similar arc that we had with Billie Piper and Rose, is that, right, we're going to take you back in time. We're going to take you to an alien planet. We're going to take you to the future. And we see that through Bill's eyes, of what's going to happen. So, yeah, very refreshing, great fun to do. And bizarrely, for a companion that you'd never seen, relatively easy to sort of lock her down.
fantastic setting here in the atmosphere of Saturn, and the fact that here we have the teams who are collecting the diamonds that are forming in space due to the, I don't want to say the space pressure, because that would be too much
gravitational pressure of Saturn. Yeah.
So where did that idea come from?
I had recently had a meeting down at the BBC's Natural History and Science unit, and they wanted to do a program called Weather on Other Planets. So with my effects hat on, I'd sat down with the directors and the producers, and they'd sort of talked me through all these planets and the extreme weather that you might find on them. And one of those was the fact that they reckon it could rain diamonds, which was a lovely visual. Now, in the end, that show didn't go ahead, or rather it didn't go ahead with me working on it because the costs involved were prohibitive. And so they went down a digital route. And I think they cut the number of planets that they wanted to show on screen anyway. But it stuck with me, this idea that you could have diamonds just raining from the skies on these big gas giants. So that was a lovely thing, just lodged as a potential story idea. And then one BAFTA screening season, I was shown Deepwater Horizon, the film about the oil rig disaster, which again, very affecting film. And I just thought, well, if I can somehow bolt these two ideas, these rednecks on an oil rig and diamond mining, I think there's a good Doctor Who story in there. So when I was asked to come up with a story, I think Johnny was already doing the historical one. I think it's set in Scotland.
It is in Edinburgh, Plague City.
Yeah, Plague City. And then Cavan was doing the present day one. So I said, well, I'll happily do the space opera one. I haven't done a full-on space opera for Doctor Who for some time. And as soon as I knew it was going to be set around Saturn, that means that you've got Titan, and that means I have to acknowledge The Invisible Enemy, which is a favourite story of mine from the 70s. So I just decided to go full on. This is, whilst not being a sequel to Invisible Enemy by any means, it's certainly set within the same world, and that was lovely to do, even down to the fact that I managed to get a C Doctor Who and the Invisible Enemy asterisk in the book, which is a little nod to the targets that I'd wanted to do for years, and kept getting knocked back by the editors at Random House, and this one got through.
Yeah, where the Doctor denies that he's the same Doctor who was on the Bible Foundation. So
yes, he just doesn't want to get into that conversation.
Yeah, but I like that. I was actually picturing it with all the emergency exits and all the sort of the stenciling and the Data 70 typeface.
Yes, exactly. And the fact that sort of, I ended up with a character who's the sister of Professor Marius's nurse. It's like, pick the most obscure character from this show and just do a little nod to them. So I did have considerable fun with that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's on page 106. I've just looked it up in my copy, so there we go.
There we go.
It's down at the bottom of the page. So lovely to be able to do that. I think that the world building here is fantastic. The fact that these do feel like real people under pressure. That's the thing. You do get the feeling of the oppression of knowing that they're up against, they've got targets, they've got deadlines, and they're living in very, very difficult, cramped conditions. And that really came across to me.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the sort of the fast world building that has to be done in a lot of science fiction movies. I mean, films like The Abyss and Aliens and Leviathan and even films like Deep Star 6, you've got to get your characters across to the audience very, very fast. I also quite liked quite an outdated way of everyone referring to each other by their surname as opposed to their Christian name, which you don't really get anymore. Everyone's very conscious of being polite to your co-workers, whereas when I was growing up, everyone was almost referred to by surname. And certainly the films I like, there's very abrupt way of chatting to people. Outland was another film that I referenced in there. So I wanted to go down that route. I wanted the dialogue and the character interaction to be like one of those films. And I did watch Outland a couple of times just to sort of get the sense of pacing and the gruffness of it across.
The trouble really begins when they're doing the dive to collect some diamonds and somebody comes back up and they're not the same. And that's just that traditional Doctor Who, but almost, it's not a trope, but it's sort of the idea that people would have, that somebody goes to do something and they come back and they're not quite the same as they were when they left.
Yes. And, again, in the back of my head, there are some great moments in sort of underwater science fiction films, particularly, where you know that something's outside the ship, but you can't see it. And that great scene in The Sea Devils, where they sent down the bathysphere with the Third Doctor in it, and then when it comes back up, he's gone. So you know that there's something down there. It's just that the down there here is the atmosphere of Saturn. So I was trying again within the world building to try and keep the science relatively straightforward, but I did have to sort of chicken out, if you like, and come up with a MacGuffin, which is, we have recently made contact with this alien species who've got gravity technology, and that's how we're keeping the thing in place in return for trading for the diamonds. So once you came up with something was like, well, okay, the science just falls apart here, then you have to sort of start playing the fantasy card, but hopefully done in a way that still works within the world that you've built.
Well, I didn't see the twist coming up when we find out just who those who are possessing are, when the Doctor goes out and finds their ship, and then there's the connection as you think, so it's two alien species at war, and there's, by that implication, it's effectively humanity's declaring war upon the space jellyfish people by having allied themselves with their rivals. And I think it's that, in many ways, it's sadly the sort of way that the world works today. It's if you're not with us, then you're against us.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got infiltrators inside working against who you don't really, you've got these criminals who are there for purely financial gain. They just want to steal the diamonds. So trying to play all these various factions off each other, that was an interesting juggling job for me, making sure that all of these different little plot strands all ultimately led to the same place, whilst giving you some breathing space for what I enjoy doing, which is creating good supporting characters. So Laura effectively becomes the ersatz companion to the Doctor within this, because you can tell the story through her eyes a little bit, and I enjoyed her character just being so besotted with where she was working that she's almost oblivious to the fact that it's a crap job.
Yeah, that determination, sort of because you like the idea of working in a particular place and sort of shaping her whole career around that. I do have to say, Mike, I was surprised that Laura Palmer lasted longer than the first couple of episodes or the first couple of pages. Was there any, was that a name borrow, or is it just a complete coincidence?
It's a name borrow from a friend of my wife's from New York, who used to work in the BBC office in New York, and used to be a regular Gallifrey convention attendee. So that's my little name check to Laura Palmer.
Oh, I was
nothing to do with Twin Peaks.
That's the one where I was envisaging. I'm sure that most people would have been thinking that, but good. But at least this Laura Palmer made it to the end.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that I liked this character. I didn't want to kill her off. She's obviously got this police training thing, and I liked playing with that aspect of it as well, in that there's effectively a murder mystery, if you like, going on at the same time as everything else.
Yeah, because I think that when you're creating something like the Bael Krat, is that the correct? Was that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Bael Krat. Excellent
win, and sort of completely alien species like that. I suppose that's one of those ones where, again, every time I'm reading anything that you're creating that's a completely alien species, thinking like, what are you thinking of in terms of their own vessel? If there's not particularly the 2 hands, 2 feet kind of and air breathing atmosphere. So I was sort of picturing something like the Leviathan from the unused version for original Alien, but even more spiky and metallic and
exactly
smaller and slots, and it's completely different.
Yeah, I went very Giger-esque with in my head of once you got to the alien ship. And yes, I like aliens with peculiar syntax in the name. So the name Baal Krat, just by coincidence, came about because I needed a good name for my very alien race. And my wife had just moved over to the UK from the US, and we were surrounded by boxes at the time. Half a dozen of these boxes were from a US company called Crate and Barrel. And seeing the odd bits of these words on the boxes, it was like Ba, El, and Krat. Oh, that's a great name for the aliens, the Baal Krat. So it's actually Crate and Barrel.
That's fantastic.
So
it's amazing.
It's my version of Terry Nation's DAL to LEK on the encyclopedia. It's just that this one's true.
Brilliant. So how do you look back on it, Mike? Because it's got a lovely cover. I particularly like the reuse of the Day of the Doctor with the crane grabbing hold of it, and obviously it's just recovering the TARDIS as it's descended.
Well, that's Lee Binding doing his best again. I'm very fond of it. It's bizarre. I'm very fond of both my Capaldi era novels, even though I was not a great fan of that era of the program. So it's the usual thing. It's if people say to me, well, if you were doing Doctor Who, what would you want it to be like? Or what's the Doctor Who that you would like this to be? If you're telling us that you're not enjoying the show at the moment, what is it you want it to be? Well, read my 2 Capaldi books, and that's what I want Doctor Who to be. I write what I would like to watch, and I've been very lucky in that for that Doctor I got to write 2 very different stories, a very traditional Earth-based horror story and a full-on space-based space opera with aliens and spacecraft and explosions. And so it's the 2 extremes of Doctor Who. It's what I've always loved about the show, is that you can do both of these things and still have them under the same overarching banner of being Doctor Who. It's the joy of the program, always has been.
And long may it continue to be.
Yeah, and long may it continue to be. And so they are 2 that I'm very fond of. Mainly because, as well, I've matured an awful lot as a writer with those 2 compared to my very early ones. I'm always going to have a soft spot for the 7th Doctor and Ace books that I wrote with Rob Perry. But by this point, I've been writing now for 30 years. So 95 was the first time I started this. So I hope I'm getting better. And I think these 2 books are better than my earlier efforts. They may not have some of the exuberance in ideas, maybe, but I certainly was happy with them as 2 pieces of work.
They certainly feel like Doctor Who to me, so the way it should be. As my pal Dave would say, proper Doctor Who.
Proper Doctor Who. Steve Cole used to say to me, he said, I like your Doctor Who books because they feel like Doctor Who but in widescreen. This in the day when everything was still 4:3. Well, of course, these days we're in the widescreen era, so I guess these 2 are, well, they are Doctor Who, but it's what it would be if it was on the cinema screen. And even that we're getting these days, so I don't know where I aim next.
You need to invent something, Mike. Brilliant. Thank you once again.
No problem.
Thanks again to Mike, who, well, I think you can gather he'll be back before too long talking about another of his Doctor Who novels. But before we continue to have a look at a contemporary review and see what the readers have said on Goodreads, let's have our second reading of the day, again courtesy of Steevie.
Ah, the control cabin, said the Doctor, scurrying down the slope eagerly. And how exactly do you deduce that? Laura hurried after him. Oh, The Doctor waved a hand at her in irritation. I've been in enough biomechanical ships to recognise a control cabin when I see one. Zygon ships, Axon ships, even the TARDIS began life as a coral outgrowth, although I do get the impression she was never watered properly. But, Laura stared around at the organic-looking space in bemusement. How? I mean, where are the controls? The instruments? Here! The Doctor thrust his hand into one of the hundreds of indentations that pockmarked the walls, floor, and ceiling of the chamber. Laura peered into the hole. But there's nothing there, no circuitry, no connections. You're still trying to make sense of this as if it's a recognisable piece of machinery. The Doctor withdrew his hand from the hole and sighed. It's not your fault, I suppose. You do your best you can with those tiny little brains of yours. Hey! Ignoring her look of indignation, the Doctor plucked at the fabric on the sleeve of her suit. Look, why do we wear these? Well, because we need something that can sustain our atmosphere, something that gives us protection against the cold, the radiation, the vacuum. And if our suits were damaged? Oh, well, we'd suffocate, we'd freeze, our blood boils. Exactly. The pressure of our bodies has nothing outside to keep it in. Now, given everything we've learned about the Bal-El Krat, they must be an aqueous life form of some kind. Aqueous? You mean liquid? Actually, I suspect they're probably more gelatinous with a consistency similar to a very badly made blancmange. But my point is, think about what happens to pressurised liquid when you release it into a normal Earth-type atmosphere. Laura did think about it. If the Bal-El Krat were a high-pressure liquid life form, then presumably they had to maintain that pressure in order to exist. Without it, the liquid in their makeup would turn to gas. They would literally evaporate into nothing. Explosively. It must make life very difficult. It must make life virtually impossible. Laura looked around the chamber, trying to get her head around such a fundamentally different form of life. So you're saying they just pour themselves into this vessel? That made the Doctor grin. Exactly! He walked to the middle of the chamber, throwing his arms wide and turning in a slow circle. This room would have been full to the brim with crew. Just think about it. No connections, no communications, no machinery, no technology, no shouting or yelling, direct control. The entire crew swimming around as if they were one creature. Orders, conversations, instructions, literally flowing between them. And then they crashed. Yes. In your solar system, there are only 3 planets that could possibly survive on. 3 gas giants that have the immense pressures they need. Then they took one hell of a risk in coming here. Yes. The Doctor looked thoughtful. I wonder why they did. Laura thought for a moment. Hang on. If they can only survive in extreme pressures, then how come the ship is in orbit up here and they ended up down there? Dunno. The Doctor shrugged. I'm guessing that if we looked, we'd find the equivalent of an escape pod missing. His eyebrows suddenly twitched as a sudden thought struck him. There must be a ship's log of some kind. Pulling out his sonic screwdriver from a pouch in his suit, the Doctor started peering into the various holes and pits in the wall. Laura looked slowly around the room. It was beginning to seem even more unlikely that Baines might be alive. Even if the Bal-El Krat had managed to transport him up here somehow, there was no way he could possibly survive in such an alien environment without his pressure armour. An organic opening in the far wall caught her eye. If there was a chance, even a slim chance, that Baines was being kept prisoner in some other part of the ship, she had to at least look. She turned to let the Doctor know her intentions, but he was crouched down on the far side of the chamber, one arm reaching deep inside one of the larger openings, the green light from his sonic device casting a large flickering shadow of him on the ceiling. Not wanting to disturb him, Laura made her way down to the opening and leaned through. The beam from her helmet lamp illuminating the narrow passageway beyond. Like the rest of the ship, the strange rib-like quality of the walls did something for Laura's nerves. It really was like being in the bowels of some enormous beast. Cautiously, she started to make her way along the corridor, steadying herself against the wall as the ground underfoot became increasingly uneven. It suddenly struck her that in a vehicle where the crew literally filled up the interior like water in a fish tank, she had no way of knowing if it was even the right way up or not. For all she knew, she could be walking on the ceiling. The corridor started to narrow, and Laura shot a nervous glance over her shoulder. The opening back out into the control cabin suddenly seemed a very long way away, and she began to doubt the wisdom of her decision to start exploring on her own. She closed her eyes, trying desperately to slow her pounding heart. This was ridiculous, she told herself angrily. She was a highly trained Federation security officer. So act like one, she muttered under her breath. Not like some teenager in a haunted house. She trained her helmet light on the passageway ahead. The twisting alien shapes made it difficult to judge distance properly, but it looked as though the corridor came to an abrupt end only a few metres ahead of her. She started to move forwards once more. If it did turn out to be a dead end, she would just turn around and go back. As she neared the end of the passageway, she became aware that it too opened out in a similar way to the one leading onto the control room. This chamber was far, far smaller, however, and there, in the far corner, there seemed to be something scattered on the floor. She turned her head, trying to train the beam from her helmet onto the objects to get a better look. As the light panned across them, Laura felt a chill of horror grip her. At the same moment, she suddenly became aware of something crashing along the corridor behind her. She spun, arm raised to ward off her attacker, only to see the Doctor's panic-stricken face staring at her. Condensation from his laboured breathing clouding the visor of his helmet. "We have to get back to the rig," he gasped. "Right now!" "Wait!" Laura shouted as he tried to turn around in the narrow passageway. "Doctor, I think this might be Baines." Laura stepped aside, allowing the light from the Doctor's helmet torch to shine on what she had found. Bones. Lots of them, the skull staring blankly from among them, clearly humanoid in origin. The Doctor hurried forward, kneeling down and scanning the pathetic pile of remains with his sonic device. "No, it's not Baines," said the Doctor grimly. "There's more than one body here, and they're not human." "Then who?" "They're Cancree." The Doctor stared up at her. "The aliens that the Balat Krat were at war with are the Cancree."
Thank you, Steevie. Now, let's turn back to issue 513 of Doctor Who magazine, when the 3 novels were reviewed in DWM, and they were put under the beady eye of Stuart Manning. And Stuart had to say, Mike Tucker's Diamond Dogs is avowedly traditional in its approach, with a foot in the past throughout. Unlike latter-day Doctor Who depictions of space and faraway planets as places in which to bask in wonder, the novel's backdrop is deliberately pragmatic. Set on the orbiting Kolos Ernesto mining ship in the far-flung future, the story indulges in the whimsy of Saturn having an atmosphere where infinite diamonds rain down from the skies, yet equally makes clear that space is just another place where people go to work. The claustrophobic location and escalating threats will be familiar to any long-term viewer of Doctor Who, lending Tucker's novel an air of cosy familiarity, possibly at odds with its otherwise hard-boiled industrial backdrop. This is one of those uniquely sci-fi workplaces where characters address one another urgently by surnames only, as if the Naughties' HR revolution never happened. Where the book finds its sense of scale is during its space sequences, which have a breadth of vision that sets them apart. Away from writing, Tucker is best known for providing miniature model effects for film and television, including Doctor Who, and it's tempting to read his loving descriptions of the space vistas and hardware in action as embellished storyboards. I dare say they'd look glorious in 35mm. Diamond Dogs takes a little while to get going, setting out its stall with a measured pace that echoes the 6-part stories of old, as the Doctor and Bill find themselves captured, accused of sabotage, and then enlisted as part of efforts to find a missing miner. There are also aspects of the book that seem to evoke a bygone era of Doctor Who, with the mining backdrop echoing stories such as the Tom Baker thriller The Robots of Death, and with one shock twist so reminiscent of John Pertwee's The Ambassadors of Death that it surely has to be a deliberate homage. None of this detracts from the book's appeal, far from it. Compared to the puzzle box roller coasters of Doctor Who's modern-day format, it's refreshing to see the current Doctor and companion placed in situations that the television episodes are unlikely to find space for. Some situations may feel familiar, but it's never less than fun to see them revisited from Bill's perspective. If anything, that blending of contemporary Doctor Who and its quainter past is something I'd like to see more of in print. Capaldi's senior, prickly Doctor feels to me like he'd be equally at home clutching a mercury fluid link and a packet of everlasting matches as an electric guitar. Yet Diamond Dogs manages to feel rooted and present as well. The Doctor's recently invigorated penchant for petty theft, featured prominently in the episode Thin Ice, is revisited as the catalyst for the story, as he sets his sights on a diamond to use as a power source. For this viewer, the Doctor indulging in gleeful casual theft felt a little jarring on television, but Tucker smartly frames the sequence from Bill's perspective, allowing a more eloquent discussion of the inherent moral implications that perhaps appeared on screen. Diamond Dogs is unpretentious entertainment throughout, and its straightforwardness is its greatest strength. That's a thumbs up from Stuart Manning then. Let's have a quick look on Goodreads and see what the most up-to-date ratings say. They give it 3.79, it's had 332 ratings and 40 reviews. It's had 24% 5-star, 36% 4-star, 31% 3-star, 5% 2-star and 1% 1-star. And here's a quick look at some of the reviews. 5-star review from Mary. I could not put this one down. Great science fiction. 5 stars from Catherine McClelland. I really liked this one because it had the feel of classic Doctor Who to it. Sally S, also 5 stars. Really enjoyed this one. Fast paced and exciting with great characterisation with a happy face emoji. 4 stars from Chris Wing. Now, if it's one thing I love, it's a Doctor Who book. Or rather, a Doctor Who book with an author I both am familiar with and enjoy. Mike Tucker has been writing Doctor Who books for a long time now, and I know he puts out tales that I will most likely enjoy. The plot is fast-paced and engaging, the voice of Bill and the Doctor are well realised, which is not a deal-breaker when not achieved. And the secondary characters are well developed. My only criticism is that the story is too short. Yes, I know, this is a common thing with me, so I like more time taken on, well, everything in a book. But I really do feel it whizzed through at a tremendous fast rate. Don't get me wrong, it certainly suits the pace of current episodes, but it did feel like an hour-long single episode. Too long for a regular 45 minutes, but not in-depth enough for 2 episodes, 90 minutes. So I can appreciate how this is perfect for many readers. You really can get easily drawn into the story, ride along at a breakneck speed, and get to a satisfying conclusion before a younger reader may get tired, I guess. There is some great imagery for the mind's eye, and, as I say, the Doctor and Bill are expertly realised, so reading their scenes are a joy. And how Tucker managed to get an approximate amount of depth to 6 or so secondary characters is a marvel to experience. And an inspiration, hopefully. Great stuff. 3 stars from Daniel Kukwa. It reads like a very good Target novelisation, including an asterisk callback to Doctor Who and the Invisible Enemy. Unfortunately, it's a bit too familiar for my taste, a mashup of episodes such as Fury from the Deep, 42, and other based Under Siege stories. Slick, Mike Tucker does write a solid action sequence, and incredibly easy to read, but I was hoping for something with a bit more substantial meat. I'm longing for the days of Doctor Who novels like The Eyeless and Prisoner of the Daleks. Oh well, you can't please everybody all of the time, but in general, lots of positivity for Diamond Dogs. So there we are, that's us at the end of today's episode. Please do leave a review for us on your podcatcher of choice, whether it be iTunes or Podbean or wherever you get your podcast from. Please do leave a positive review and give us a good rating, and then it can help more people to find our episodes. You can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we have a group there where we'll post extra pictures and things like that. And we also have a Twitter account at Power of 3 Pod with a number 3, or you can follow me personally on Finished Zine, and I'm also on Blue Sky at the same name, and I share all of the Power of 3 content through my personal account, again at Finished Zine, FINISHEDZINE. And that's us just about out of time. And as you know, if you're a regular listener, we like to play it with a song at the end. And there's only really one choice for this one, given that a certain Mr. David Bowie had a song called Diamond Dogs. It would be slightly crazy if we didn't play that. Diamonds are forever, you say? Sorry, Shirley. We're over to Mr. Bowie. Until next time, I've been Kenny Smith. This has been The Power of 3. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. As they pulled you out
message and tell